In this panel, we have with us Siddharth Pava, who is the founder and CEO at 3Cs Consulting and former CEO of Meru Cabs. He will also be moderating this panel discussion. We also have Ashutosh Srivastava with us, Head of Operations, Ajio. We have Mrityunjay Kumar, Head of Customer Experience in glowroad.com. And we also have Rajat Dhanda, Program Lead at mykirana.com and Shikhar Plus, HUL. Over to the esteemed panel members. Thank you.
Thank you, Laukika. And it's a pleasure to be moderating this session. We have got some esteemed panel, Rajat from HUL, Mrityunjay from Glowroad, and Ashutosh from AGO. I'll quickly start with my introduction. I am Sid Pava. I've spent about 25 years in the corporate world. I've spent time with organizations like Hindustan Unilever. I used to run their planning function for across their home and personal care. I worked in ice cream, beverages, and all the businesses over there. Then I moved on and worked in the pharma sector with the Piramal Group and was the chief of supply chain, global supply chain over there. Then I ran Meru Cabs as a chief executive officer for 6 years. Very exciting time, created the category along with some of the other big players now. And then for last 3 years, I'm an independent consultant and advisor. And very happy to see that the report that was just released by Redseer, some of the brands that I support in delivery, some of the brands that I advise in terms of how to go to market have made it to the champions list. So really proud moment for me. Thank you so much. And this is still with the fact that we don't work with Shadowfax. So I'm sure the moment we start working with Shadowfax, it's going to be even much more progress that these brands will see. So thank you so much. I don't know if the panelists want to give a short introduction, a minute introduction about themselves, then that'll be very helpful.
Hey Siddharth, thanks. I'm Ashutosh. I lead operations and experience for Ajio and a couple of verticals at Reliance Fashion and Lifestyle. Prior to this, I have approximately 5 years of exposure into the e-commerce operations set up while working at Jabong Myntra earlier and then at Meesho. Worked across multiple operations and strategy charters prior to that, right after my MBA from IIM Kozhikode. So offline operations, been part of that for around 5-6 years, consulting and starting projects around that, and e-commerce operations for past 6.5 years, I think. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashutosh.
Sure.
Rajat, would you want to go next?
Yeah, sure, Siddharth. Hi, everyone. I'm Rajat. I've been with HUL for close to 6 years now. Initially, till recently, setting up HUL's B2C arm, which includes our hyperlocal channel, MyKirana, and our partnerships across hyperlocal, the initial stages of our D2C, and right now looking into the eB2B side of our initiatives in India.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rajat. Mrityunjay, if you can give a short introduction about yourself.
Sure, thanks. And I'm working as a VP Customer Experience at Glowroad, which is a social commerce player. And prior to this, I've had additionally some 2.5 years of business strategy experience at Traction. And that was post my MBA, which I did from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our panel, we are going to be talking about, the growth in the D2C business, in the e-commerce business is going to come from next 100 cities. We all know that the top 25, 30 cities, 40 cities, there is a lot of presence that is there of the D2C brands, or as we called as direct native brands, and also for the e-commerce players, etc. So my question is that what are going to be the challenges that are expected in these next 100 cities from where the growth is going to come? Is it going to be in the infrastructure space? Is it going to be the delivery time that is going to get compromised? What about the box opening experience? Those are the things that we would be discussing in this panel discussion. But what I will open our discussion with is, and I'll open with you, Rajat, that we are already, HUL is already present in these towns through their offline channel, which is there. And, one of the key things that HUL has been doing in the past few years is making sure that it makes inroads into all the kirana stores and all the pan bidi shops, etc., and make this products available. So what is that HUL is looking from the B2C space, etc., in these next 100 towns, and what is that you want to really achieve by entering these D2C markets in these towns?
So Siddharth, what I'll do is I'll just start off with some of the thoughts from HUL side, and then the rest will be my personal thoughts on this space. From HUL side, see, we go where our shoppers are and what the shoppers value. So for us, the number one attempt and focus always stays in directly reaching out to our retailers or our shoppers offline and online. So there will be a continued effort into that space from eB2B side as well as the B2C side. And this 100 towns for sure are seeing a trend, and being in HUL, we feel we are aware of the trend slightly faster than the market is. So for us, it is about how to react fast to it and deliver to that expectations. It could be the changing in consumption, the pattern of consumption. It could be media-led, video-led, social media-led, etc. So HUL has done a lot of such initiatives in different markets using local language, using audio, video, etc. And that attempt will go on. Personally, using the experience, and if I have to extrapolate, what will be important for any brand in these markets will be, which are those areas which have enough density for you to start off with, because as you spread yourself more to the 100 towns, your cost increases, the cost to service, customer expectation changes. You have different expectation on last mile, SLA, return, etc. And the question will be about the right trade-offs. That what do you prioritize first? What do you prioritize second? And that, I think, differentiator will be important for any D2C brand going into the next 100 cities.
Okay, perfect. That's very helpful. My next follow-up question that is there, and Mrityunjay, I would want to understand from you, and especially from Glow Road point of view, that it's more of a social commerce, etc. With a lot of your suppliers as well as buyers would be already present in those cities, etc. So how do you see what kind of a capabilities you require, infrastructure that you are looking forward in those areas, and how do you really what is your expectation from some of the service providers in this space, such as Shadowfax or many of the other service providers that are there? What is your expectation from them in these areas?
Sure, Sid. So basically, in a social commerce context, right, the delivery experience slightly differs from the usual e-commerce, right? And hence, we are looking, especially whenever we integrate with anyone or whenever we partner with anyone, be it Shadowfax or any other 3PL partner, we always focus that, or we always prioritize that they should have their own presence over there, because it's always easier to calculate the entire experience that we are expecting of to the last mile guy, right? Till the last mile person. And that helps us to create that kind of trust that the reseller is looking for and that eventually the end customer is looking for. Because in these tier 3, tier 4 cities, it's all about trust. If you're not able to gain that trust from those guys or those end customers, we'll never be able to penetrate. We might be able to get one or few transactions from them, but we'll never be able to do that. And to build that trust, in my opinion, it's very important that the service provider have a very strong control in terms of the operations, in terms of how things are being done over there at the ground level. And hence, your own infrastructure is always important.
Perfect. And Mrityunjay, I think you've touched upon a very important topic, which is trust. Because I think somewhere tacitly, even the Redseer delivery index talks about, delivery delight index talks about that it is all about the experience, etc. So my question, Ashutosh, to you is, that, the AJIO has been now present in a large number of cities. They are doing, delivery using various alternative methods and technologies. But we also know that Reliance is also one of the organizations which put a lot of commitment onto the business models, etc., that they go ahead with, whether it was telecom, whether it was retail, or for that matter, now even the e-commerce space. So do we expect a lot of capacities, capabilities, infrastructure to be built in by players like AJIO in these tier 2 markets, tier 3 markets? Or are you going to be looking at partnering with some of the capabilities and capacities that are already there in these markets? What would be your strategy that you would want to work upon?
Sure. So Siddharth, the most important aspect, right, where we are all here is to understand how a consumer behaves. So creating a consumer cohort basis where they are is extremely important, first of all. So a tier 2, tier 3 consumer behaves in a different way. The aspirations are different. Why will they come on an online platform to buy? To their overall retention varies from a person to person, and specifically for this specific cohort. So understanding that is very important, because, and then it's about the product type. For example, we saw that a person might pay extra to get a next day delivery on pharmacy, but might not do in sense of fashion. So understanding all these nuances is extremely important. The idea is to keep the best in class experience so that you are able to retain your consumer, right? It all has to make unit economic sense. The challenge with tier 2, tier 3 is that your average order value is lower, and an average distance usually traveled by a shipment is higher. So you're spending more on the logistics and the fulfillment side. You're earning less because the average selling price is lower. Hence, it becomes even more pertinent for you to recover your customer acquisition cost and make all unit economic sense to retain that consumer. So devising and designing a customer ideal experience parameters for the tier 2, tier 3 consumer is very different from how a metro or a tier 1 customer, first of all, expects. Yep. So that is one. Then it's about the identification of the sweet spot between cost and the experience and retention parameters. So the way we are planning to build is the right mix of working closely with in terms of deep integrations and partnerships with third-party players, both on the warehousing, fulfillment, as well as on the logistics side. But wherever it makes sense to us to set up our own warehouses, set up our own fleet, do some kind of acquisitions, we have been doing that, and that's been the roadmap which we are expecting to follow. But it will be a unique set of solutions deployed across different parts of the country, depending on what the customer wants, where are we in terms of capabilities, or the network has those capabilities or not. But that's how we're planning to design the ecosystem.
Okay, so this is very helpful. So what I'm hearing from all of you is that the behavior of the consumer is very different in these towns. There is a huge issue in terms of trust that would be there, because many of them are coming onto the platform for the first time. The AOVs are much lower. Yeah, the cost of delivery is much higher. What I have seen in some of the other businesses, that most of the businesses are cash on delivery over here, because again, leading from trust and behavior, and also the return percentage is very high. So overall net, this is a very, very challenging business that we see that is going to be there for, all the brands that are going to trying to move into the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So my question to you is, why do you think this is important? And how really are you going to be doing it? I heard you, Ashutosh, talking about deep integration with all the partners, building your own capabilities, etc. But my question is it really important and really all the brands have decided that they want to do it? Or is it more like a FOMO that, people are saying, since everybody's talking about going to tier 2, let us also move to the tier 2?
Look, so that in my first response, I covered largely the challenges of serving this particular segment, right? But what about the other side, which is the opportunity? There is a tremendous opportunity. We all are aware that India still resides in tier 2, tier 3, right? The overall economic opportunity which exists there, nobody can undermine that. Any platform which says that, oh, I'll focus only on tier 1, tier 2, means I'm not sure about the overall business viability of that, right? So anybody who has made a product market fit in tier 1 and metro, everybody is moving into for the past 18 months, right? Since the lockdowns and even slightly before that, we saw everybody moving, all the large platforms moving into tier 2, tier 3. The growth in specific e-commerce sector which has happened largely has been propelled by tier 2, tier 3. Now, one of the reasons is lack of selection, and that opportunity to shop doesn't exist in tier 2, right?
Yep.
The availability. So I'm from fashion ecosystem. The availability of brands, the availability of sizes, SKUs does not exist at all. So why will a guy sitting in Lucknow is not tier 2, but a guy sitting in Allahabad, why will they not want to buy a Nike, Zoom kind of a series shoes, right? Why will they not want to? They want to, but it's not available in Allahabad. So the opportunity definitely exists. It's about the identification. And I'll tell you from my own experience, that individual is willing to wait for you. Possibly they don't want the delivery to happen next day, which a guy sitting in Delhi will definitely want. You deliver to them in 5 days, that's all right. But you have to promise that I'll deliver in 5 days and you deliver in 5 days. So that speed and expectation correlation is extremely important for that tier 2, tier 3 guy. But because the resistance to change is definitely there, right? The trust issue which Nitin talks about. If you break that once, then forget about it. That guy is never coming back on your platform. He'll buy something else, but he'll not buy from your platform. So maintaining that trust is extremely important. But that guy is willing to walk extra mile with the platform. That's also definitely there. So opportunity exists there. It's just about identification and tracking the game.
Okay. Ashutosh, I would want to challenge you on that, and based on my experience, I have seen that, yes, initially we all believe that, somebody who's sitting in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and I'm not even talking about Allahabad, I'm talking about even smaller towns like Kasganj or Etah, etc. In the initial period, they are quite comfortable with saying, okay, I may get, my customer experience could be shade lower than what somebody gets in the big town. But over a period of time, and that over a period of time moves very fast, that their expectation is, why should my experience be any lower than what somebody gets in tier 1 or tier 2? When I'm paying the same set of amount of money, when I am equally buying that brand, why should that be something that is going to be lower? And therefore, I want to segue to a second topic that I had. And, I know Levers has a lot of these Kirana stores into these tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities down over there. I know Reliance has been talking very vociferously about that they want to use the Kirana model, etc. So what do you think is the role that these Kirana players can play in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, etc.? And can they work along with some of the 3PL logistics partners or with the direct brands, etc., and play a very, very important role as we move forward in the journey for 100 new cities in the D2C player?
Sure. So, Siddharth, first point is that the expectation of consumer experience is all relative, right? Because the parameters which define a consumer experience remain same. There will be delivery speed, it will be the promise breach, it will be cancellation, fake attempts, all those things, right? But the relativity of these parameters vary from tier to tier. So that's a very important aspect. So as you said, a guy sitting in Etah will still be fine, but that doesn't absolve me from the responsibility to continuously improve. When I start, or for example, the overall ecosystem, when they started delivering in Etah, they started delivering in 8 days on an average. But continuously you have to improve. That's where Kirana stores come in, right? Because it gives you couple of opportunities. One is it brings a lot of variance in the ecosystem. The flexibility is brought by the Kirana stores. You are able to consume, because a platform has a lot of peaks in the ecosystem, right? So if I'm doing 100 orders a day, tomorrow because of sale or something, I might start doing 120 orders, 150 orders. All of this becomes a shipment and gets consumed in the ecosystem. Everybody has a limited capacity to build over an immediate short time. Kirana stores come there. And they give you that extra flexibility in building that ecosystem. And it's a success story. A lot of players with platforms like Myntra, Amazon, who have built this ecosystem already. Shadowfax has been a leader in that. Elastic Run and a couple of other logistics players have very beautiful way built and integrated these Kirana stores into their overall delivery charter. So it gives you flexibility. It gives you very quickly to scale up your ecosystem, helps you to reach out to a lot of people. So speed, flexibility, and the ease of business, it definitely creates benefits on all these aspects.
Sure. And Rajat, let me ask this question to you as well. And you know, being part of Livers, and there are so many stories about the Livers Amma, etc., which has the ability to go right up to the last village. You know, I remember when we were doing those projects, even villages with 70-80 population, these Ammas had the capability to actually reach there and deliver the products. So how do you think Livers is going to use the network and the capability that they have delivered of the Kiranas and the Ammas, etc., to make sure that really a D2C happens? And if you can throw some light on that, that'll be very helpful.
Yeah, sure, Siddharth. So I have a slightly different take. Typically, the stereotype people have on Kirana stores is they can act as a last mile support, and definitely that gives us a lot of strength, and not to contradict the strengths they bring for sure. But in the medium to long term, it is about what value are we giving to the Kirana store owner, the entrepreneur, so that they are partnering with us and not just outsourcing a certain part of the capacity to us. And that's how we look at them as partners who can benefit from the sale of goods from their store itself. You know, two things, two broad reasons, ones which you keep in mind when you go to a Kirana store or shipment from a Kirana store. One is the cost. You are using a shared capacity. You want to reduce the cost, like Ashutosh very clearly said, that there is a fluctuation in demand, especially when you go to tier 2, tier 3. My screen, I think, is frozen.
Yes, your screen is frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, good. So so the shared capacity is what helps us reduce the cost. The second part is customer experience, and that is very, very important for the brands. And when you outsource your capacity, the customer experience is at risk. And that's something as a trade-off any logistics provider or any D2C solution has to keep in mind. Keeping in mind these two trade-offs, once the Kirana store kind of model, but involving the goods of the Kirana store itself, then the skin in the game ensures that the person understands the market much better than you can in terms of how the last mile can be executed, how the customer experience can be taken care of, how the availability can be taken care of. And if that is cracked well, I feel it has a very, very huge potential. And even for Livers working from the benefit of Kirana, you mentioned Shakti Amma, etc. It's the benefit of the person who is doing that transaction, who is taking the risk, and who is going and connecting you to the last mile shopper is also very important, and one should keep in mind. But potential for India and the next decade for all these stores is a lot.
Perfect. Very well said. Mrityunjay, let me ask you a question, and you know, this could be maybe just blue sky thinking for me also. The model that Glow Road has, it's all about social commerce, which is there. How is Glow Road thinking about to actually partner with some of these opportunities that are coming on their way? You know, would they look at these nodal points that have been generated by them, whether on the supply side or on the demand side, to get into an area where they can service a larger number of brands, service larger number of products, etc.? Or is the opportunity very big in just the social commerce, and the focus is going to be continuously on the social commerce as well?
So Siddharth, to answer that, definitely social commerce has a very big potential market. How to address that social commerce is something that everybody is finding a solution for in different ways. Obviously, Glow Road is finding through via their resellers. There are few people who are finding it through their influencers or through video commerce or something else, right? Similarly, even the case of the Lever Ammas, right? There are a lot of cooperative groups of ladies, especially in the hinterland of Rajasthan and Haryana, that we have heard they're doing a fabulous job for a big FMCG company in terms of distribution. And we are kind of in some discussions, in some maybe evaluating those channels of distribution, because for two reasons. It would obviously bring down our cost of deliveries. Also, it would act as a very viral distribution mechanism as compared to a reseller. Reseller only has a set of contacts, or only has a set of channels to whom they can reach out to, right? But through them, we can even reach out to the people who are actually not at all on the online world, right? They do not exist in the entire online persona. And hence, I think that it would come very handy maybe in the future.
Perfect. Understood. I would want the listeners and the viewers, if there are any questions that they want to ask the panelists, then please feel free to type it in the Q&A section, and then the panelists would be more than happy to actually answer that while we move on to our next question. So one of the things that India is always considered as a challenging situation is because of the number of languages and dialects that are there. And I know many of the large organizations, whether it is in the like Paytm, etc., they have really done a lot of work in making sure that there is language available, different languages available on their platform, etc. How do you people think that what impact and what effect having different languages is required if you have to really reach those 100 cities, the next 100 cities, etc.? Or is it something that the brand power is more than sufficient for people to be aware of the brand and the language does not make any difference over there? What would be your views? Rajat, let me start with you this time.
If I take just one step back, language is of course important when you are able to connect with your target shoppers in the medium in which they understand the most. It could be the channel of communication. So are you using TV, digital, video, etc.? And what is the content of that communication? And of course, the language used. And it's not just the communication language, your brand, maybe your in-app experience as well. The language is important. But the reason I said I want to take one step back is standalone, these are important decisions. Okay, standalone, these are very important. But for a brand at a different stage, the first question is, at what stage do you implement a different complexity into an end-to-end system? You want your customer support in that language. You want your advertisement in that language. You want your in-app experience in your language. But have you covered the baseline number of shoppers who would have anyways adapted to your platform to see that which language, which region is most important to you? And have you done enough study to take that call? So, and the reason I've said is the FOMO in the market of saying that maybe I'm not getting growth because of that is the key lever may lead us to blindly follow those trends. For us, it's always about understand the customer reason of why a customer buys from you. Like you said, it could be the power of the brand, it could be the availability of the brand, it could be the way you are communicating. And at the right time, take the call on language, because of course it will give a delta. At what cost will be the question.
Sure. Okay. Ashutosh, any views you have on the language? Because what I hear from Rajat is it all depends on where your brand stands at this point of time. And if your brand has reached a certain level, then obviously you should start thinking about those things. But if your brand awareness level in the brand pyramid is at a certain level, then obviously focus more on the value proposition rather than too much on the regional language, etc. Do you have different views, or do you think that's something that would be appropriate for the D2C brands to think at this point of time?
No, I'm completely aligned with what Rajat said, right? And if you look at the journey of online shopping in India, right? The first product market fit which everybody tried to solve was for the tier 1 and metro ecosystem, where through research and generally you understand that people will be well conversant in English. Hence, that was the medium of communication at anywhere, right? It's within the app or through the customer support ecosystem, chat, or wherever. Next, everybody realized that we have to move to tier 1. Post tier 1, you want to move into tier 2, tier 3, where different platforms figured out that my PMF is more in Hindi speaking belt, then I'll make a Hindi app, whether I do that. Accordingly, people did a lot of such changes. So it makes sense for you to get some kind of understanding. Till the time, for example, I don't go ahead and acquire consumers in Andhra and Telangana. They're different consumers. I can't treat them the same way I treat people in Maharashtra. I just need to understand the nuances. If the requirement is there, that the kind of experience I want to provide involves me giving them the support in their native language, then it makes sense for me to do it. But unnecessarily doing it is just a cost. As Rajat mentioned, means doing a FOMO, behaving just because of FOMO doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
It has to be basis what the consumer wants. And if he or she wants it, then definitely we have to solve for it.
Perfect. Perfect. What do you think about the pricing strategy for these tier 2, tier 3, and maybe down cities? Obviously, HUL has always, followed the practice of the pricing would be broadly consistent, etc. But do you think, considering the purchase power of the smaller towns, etc., there would be differential pricing that would be there, that you think as an opportunity for the D2C brands, or that's not something on the cards at this point of time?
Siddharth, is that to me?
Yes, to you and to everybody else.
Yeah. So let me just take this, right? One of the most important projects which everybody right now is trying to drive is personalization, which is about effectively what you want, right? So at any point of time, most of the e-commerce platforms have lakhs and lakhs of SKUs. What do you want to showcase to a specific consumer is only you, first of all, don't want to showcase the same set of SKUs to everybody. The moment you do that, it's plain vanilla solution. But effectively, you want to personalize your solution basis what consumer expects. So you might not want to showcase brands which are worth about 10,000 rupees. Just an example, all right? To a consumer sitting in ETA. If you understand that the order per view, that's just one of the metrics, is very high for the specific set of consumers, let me showcase those SKUs to tier 2, tier 3. So differential pricing, possibly I don't agree. What I agree more is a personalized experience to that consumer, not only post-buying, but also in-app experience, a personalized experience. That makes much more sense to me.
Okay, okay. Rajat, what are your views on the pricing?
So I would start with agreeing with what the part with Ashutosh said, that in the beginning, one of the answers was, the availability is a challenge. So you don't need to have the whole E to Z of your inventory. You need to have a limited set of inventory, more curated, because of course the value density or the AOV has to be up for you to justify going so much in depth in India. And as well as the expectation, it's all about setting the expectation and meeting it rather than trying to beat the expectation at least. On pricing, Siddharth, one of the thing is, it's not about getting the best deal. It is about the perception that are you being fairly treated is important. So you may buy a t-shirt today, or let's say you may buy an electronic device today, which is of 3,000 bucks, and then you are very happy with it. You've got a great deal. And tomorrow you realize it's available in your market for 2,000. So the same great experience just goes for a toss. And if you just need to know that you treated fairly. So brands, rather than blindly going for a price discounting as a strategy for tier 2 growth, because the cost to serve increases, have to keep in mind expectation versus reality match, this right assortment selection, and the perception of the price points with the shopper. And that will be a better starting point than a blind discount across all the SKUs, which was probably working in tier 1 to tier 2 towns as well.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Rajat. So we have a question from, I can't read the name because it says anonymous. Do you see a proliferation of micro warehouses in tier 2 and tier 3 towns? If yes, would it be a mix of self and 4PL managed warehouses with delivery by local logistics player? So I think Ashutosh, earlier in your talk, you mentioned about it, that you are, at least AGO is looking for making their own capacities, capabilities, and also ready to partner with some of the 4PLs, etc. Anything more that you would want to add on this question?
It's the same thing, right? So that means I will set this up or will partner with somebody to set it up, because only if my decent set of consumers exist there And for me to retain them on the platform, it's important for me to crack that delivery speed and the experience. The moment it makes sense and I have decent number of people there for me, for the unit economics to work, I'll go ahead and set it up.
Perfect.
That's how it works.
Okay. Then there is another question from Shiv Bansal. Companies like StoreKings, Frontier Market, or in 3 operate because 3PL partners don't have penetration in T3, T4 markets. Do you think it is a dying market as 3PL players expand their PIN code? So sorry, I wasn't very clear about this question. What is a dying market? Is it these companies dying market, or is the cities dying market? Rajat or Mrityunjay, would you like to take this question? Do you want me to repeat it?
I guess it will be helpful because it was not very clear by the end. Yeah.
Companies like StoreKing, Frontier Market, or in 3 operate because 3PL partners don't have penetration in T3, T4 markets. Yes, because the brands are not there, so the 3PLs are not there. But the question is, do you think it is a dying market as 3PL players expand their PIN codes?
I think the question there is it's a question on the existence of the likes of StoreKing and ShopX, right? Early former ShopX. I feel there is a distinction in what StoreKing does. They are into kind of an assisted commerce and not essentially they are providing a delivery to the last mile. So they're not enabling last mile delivery. They are enabling that assisted commerce, which maybe likes of Glow Road or social commerce player or someone else in tier 3 are trying to solve, right? Online or maybe awareness around online commerce. So that is the problem that they are trying to solve, and not essentially that. So I don't think it will be a dying market, but obviously it will have some kind of threat from the other channels of awareness that comes in and make those tier 3, tier 4 people aware about the commerce, and then they would directly go on the commerce site and buy it rather than buying it from the store.
Sure. Thank you, Mrityunjay. Thank you very much. So that's all. I think we are also, end of our time for the discussion. But really, thank you very much, Rajat, Mrityunjay, Ashutosh, for your valuable inputs and your time. This is really, really helpful. And all I can say is all the brands are very eager to go to the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 markets. They are looking for some of the service providers, 3PL, 4PLs to be present over there. Make sure that there is the integration between these brands done at a very deep level because obviously the demand signals are not going to be very, very prominent. There's going to be huge variability of demand. So very exciting time for the consumer in these markets, brands to be reaching in those markets, and also for the 3PL and 4PL player to start providing services in those markets. With that, thank you so much to all our viewers. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.